welcome back. We're going to start this aspect of the frozen shoulder course on the anterior chain. So this goes from hand via the chest through the abdomen to the opposite inner thigh and calf. We're really going to hone in on the pecs and the biceps because I find that due to this is one of the precursors to why people can't do why the frozen shoulder happens, is that this junction gets tight and then the arm doesn't want to expand backwards. And so the shoulder blade kind of gets locked in place. So we'll start with stretching the pecs. We're going to hit it at 3 different angles. So at first here, I'm actually going to go here. I'm just at 90 degrees to my shoulder. The pec major and really the pec minor goes at this angle, so I'm just going to integrate in a little bit of self-massage here as I do that. You can kind of cross agitate. In massage it's called cross fiber friction. You could use a massager for this. You can use your hand. You can also kind of squeeze. And then the next angle that we're going to get at is the Y straight arm shape, and this is really the pec minor junction. So really here, if you can, you want to try to get up into that armpit where you're trying to pull your pec major, basically just trying to grip and pull that off of your rib cage. And then lastly, I'm going to go 90 degrees, and I'm really going to try to stretch through my chest there as well. I could continue massaging and just breathing. Okay, taking that to the other arm. I'm starting it perpendicular to my body. Another thing I could do here, instead of using my hand, is use a massager, and then I can take that all down my abdomen and really kind of focus on this pressing through. Because this fascial chain does encompass the abdomen, and if you think about it, if part of this is from potentially sitting and working with your arms bent or driving, those abdominal muscles are going to get constricted. It's another reason why I don't really encourage people nowadays to think about core strength as crunches, but instead to think about core strength as strengthening your back. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit more in the next video and then in the workout portion. Again, massaging. Part of this fascial chain as well encompasses the face. So we will do just a little bit of a face massage. So I'm just kind of dragging down to my temples and then pulling on down. Another thing that I'll post a link to is using a massager for your hands. It's lovely. Then I'm going to take this meaty guy, the sternocleidomastoid, or the SCM for short. I'm going to glide my fingers up that meaty muscle as I tip my head. And then I'm going to do that as I twist my head. And I'm going to alternate. So I'm tipping and twisting. We'll do that one more time each way. Tip and twist. And then I tip and twist. I can also go just in front of that muscle and drag down as I go and drop my head back. You can also kind of try to give yourself a double chin and do the same thing. So I'll do one more each way. And then lastly, my favorite things that people don't think to do, but as we are masking yet again with COVID, maybe you never gave it up, but getting at those ears. It's amazing how much tension we hold here, and that can kind of reverberate across the face. Okay, moving on down it for our massage. As I was just mentioning about the abdominal muscles getting tight, those six-pack abs run down the front of the abdomen and they attach into the pubic symphysis. So we're going to do a little bit of pinning and moving our legs around to try to stretch that out. There's also an inner thigh muscle that I call the pesky pectineus, and we'll go in for that. The pesky pectineus and the pesky pec minor. So first, I have my fingers on my pubic symphysis. I'm just gonna push to try to get some of that tension out. So I'm just above the bone. You can also pull the other way. Intuitively, my body wants more of the pushing motion. Then in that pocket that is the groin, I'm gonna pin in there and then drop my legs out to the sides and then lift back up. You could also kind of drop, straighten, swivel and pull in and reverse that. You could also do one leg at a time. And then feel free to do that kind of all through here to get some release. Next, to get the massage portion for the inner thighs, I'm going to use a foam roller. You could also use a massager. This I find would be a little bit difficult to really get at it and do it with your hands. So I'm just rolling back and forth. And then once you kind of find a little sticky spot or a spot that's a little bit tense or uncomfortable, you can rotate your thigh up and down on it. I could also be here if I wanted to keep my neck more relaxed. And then I just got to play with this, because if I turn my thigh in, I'm putting more pressure on whatever that knot is. So sometimes I'll just stay internally rotated and roll back and forth. Okay, we'll do the other side. And finding my rotation. People forget about the inner thighs, and it's crazy. A lot of times the knots here are actually a big underpinning in lower back pain. So if that's also a problem for you or anyone you know, get them the foam rolled or inner thighs. So we've done a bit of self-massage and we've done a bit of stretching. A couple of other areas to still think about stretching would be the biceps. I always say to clients, in an ideal world, one option of doing this would be on the floor, thinking about if somebody has tight hamstrings or just tighter range of motion. In this case, I'm using a dowel, but you could totally just use a towel. So if this is where you're starting and that is what feels like a stretch across the front of your body, particularly in the biceps, totally cool. What you're trying to do ultimately is walk your hands in and really open through the front of the chest to try to get the pinkies to touch. And if you're able to do that, then you're trying to press backwards with the towel. If you're on the floor, you would just shimmy your butt forwards. I do this once a week and I hold for a minute to a minute and a half. I stop or I sit back up a bit if I start getting nerve pain that's going down my arms. Okay, next stretch, we're trying to get inner thighs. If you look at this and there's no way in hell that this is happening, a couple of other options would be your traditional butterfly stretch. You could put yourself up on some kind of a pillow or bolster or a block. You could lay with your legs against the wall and do exactly what I'm doing of having the butterfly stretch. I could also open legs that way. And then if your knees are bent, your knees are bent. So I'm here, this is more of just a traditional ballet type stretch. I'm gonna side bend, but I'm really gonna try to back bend as I do that. So I'm using my elbow and my inner thigh to press me open. If that feels okay, and obviously you're watching this because your shoulder's probably a little bit stuck, the notion of your arm reaching overhead may not happen in sort of that back bend, but that's what you're trying to go for. You could have the hand behind your head and see if that is a little bit more feasible. If you really wanted to get fancy, you could try and do like a yoga bind where I'm trying to reach towards my back thigh. And then we'll switch. Pressing. And trying to press my chest open. And I'll breathe for 5 full breaths there. Now lastly, for this anterior chain, we're going to look at proper activation of the anterior chain. So I'm thinking the diagonal of my inner thigh crossing through my obliques, so my abdomen, to the opposite shoulder without overutilizing, in particular, my bicep or even hand tension. So a lot of times with the pecs, I stress that people, if you're thinking about strengthening your chest, that one, you don't do a bent arm version like a chest fly, but focus on the eccentric loads, so meaning the stretch phase using a weight. Here I'm going to do that because I don't have a bench that you could do in a gym, but you could totally do this at home with a longer 36-inch foam roller. I'm laying back. I have my arms up. I'm going to let the shoulders relax in the sockets, and I'm doing a slow open. And then I'm coming back up. I'll do 2 more of those. Shoulders heavy. And I work with my hands too, so I'm feeling a little bit of nervy tension, like tingling fingers on my right arm when I get to that last portion there. I'm doing this without weights. You could totally throw a dumbbell in. And I'm actually visualizing too the stretch of that skin that we kind of focused on in the beginning as I go. And then just like we did in the beginning, we're going to hit the different angles here. So there's my Y. And then here, and you're going to try to keep the elbows a little bit higher than the wrists if possible. Because by doing that, you're really opening the chest more versus, actually, you know what? Play with it. It's not right or wrong. It's just, it hits different segments of the chest. Okay, and then next I'm playing with that oblique activation. So I'm going to let my arm and my leg go away from one another. And I'm going to focus on that diagonal of my core, bringing it back up. Now that leg really wants to go out to help me balance. That's another one where I say the ideal world. In an ideal world, that wouldn't happen. That's what I'm shooting for. I also felt this bottom arm kind of trying to tense. It keeps wanting to shrink up. So I'm telling it doesn't have to help either. And then opposite here. I guarantee you there's going to be one diagonal that you're going to be able to feel a lot more easily than the other. And then for the last portion of my activation, we're thinking about activating the anterior deltoid. So we're just going to do a front arm lift. You could do weights here, but you really want to make sure that you aren't bending the elbows at all. If this is a motion that totally pisses off your shoulder, try to find an angle somewhere in here that doesn't. You could also play with different wrist positions and see if one of those angles doesn't bug the front of the shoulder. It is kind of like a slow drag. So if I do this, I'm sort of thinking about like I'm lifting something or carrying something. And then you notice I just wiggled my fingers because I could feel my left hand tensing. This is part of that connection of potentially it's your tight hands that are exacerbating this frozen shoulder pathology or impingement. Okay, so that was our anterior chain massage, stretch, and activation. Not going to do a posterior chain like I have in other videos because a lot of the overlap here actually comes from the lateral chain, which basically means like another big reason why your shoulders ticked off is that you have weak lats. So that will be weak and or underactive lats. That's what we'll focus on in the next session. Thanks for watching.